Hey everyone, James from TDB here, bringing you another Inbetweenisode. Today I am going to be talking about a favorite of mine, the 2004 Biyun Hao Manzhuan. And so I actually recorded an episode on this tea back in 2020. I think it was May 2020, so I'm recording this almost in May in 2026. So about 6 years later, and it, I mean, if you remember what was going on in May 2020, it was mostly nothing good. And it exists in this group of episodes that I filmed, I released, they exist in the world, and I have very little memory of them whatsoever. I don't remember doing them, so I rewatched the video, I'm like, okay, that's what I said about the tea, that's what I thought of it then, and it's a tea that I had had at that point for a year or two, and I talked a lot about how it was a little pricier than teas that I have more regularly, so it's a little bit less of a daily drinker and how I plan ahead for it. So some of that stuff has held true. This remains a core favorite for me. Excuse me. But the 75 cents to 80 cents per gram feels a little antiquated just because this tea is quite a bit more pricey now. I still think, in my opinion, that it is absolutely worth the cost if it hits that zone of teas that you enjoy. For me, it absolutely does. So it remains perhaps amongst my most favorite, even maybe the most favorite of the teas that I own more than just like a small amount of. And I have started to incorporate it into the rotation a bit more. So that price point in 2020 was a bit of a sticky point for me. It's a little bit less of a sticky point now for me. So that has to do with just stuff that's happened in my life and current financial situation and whatnot. So I really do enjoy this tea, but it is a tea that I continue to want to. It's like, oh, okay, on Wednesday I'm gonna have a Biyun Hao Manzhuan session, and I want to be able to focus on it. I want to set the right context and stuff. So in that sense, it continues to be that tea. And I think for pu'er people in general, this got me thinking too that pu'er is a very particular tea. Not everyone is going to grab it immediately. So getting on the same wavelength as someone, like if you're trying to introduce someone to tea, like this is not a tea that I would have with my wife. It was something I said in the 2020 episode. And that's because she simply wouldn't enjoy it that much. So it's a tea to really be enjoyed either on your own or with someone else that's really going to like a pu'er tea like this. So we're going to be brewing this tea here and talk a little bit about what kind of sets it apart. So I actually just filmed a comparison episode, so I have two of this tea going on right now. Lucky me. But I'm going to be having the U.S. stored one, which is from the same cake that I was drinking in 2020. So this one, pretty tattered wrapper. Bugs love it. I love it. Everyone loves it. So yeah, let's go. So this is steep number 4. So what really does set this tea apart? Well, a little bit about Biyun Hao. First, they are not the most well-known Taiwanese boutique producer. In fact, apparently in Taiwan, they are lesser known than places like Chenyuan Hao, certainly, Shizi Hao, Yongqing Hao. Part of that is because they operate a lot sort of behind the scenes. So I think in some ways we are kind of lucky to have access to them and have some brand awareness about them in the West, because they aren't necessarily like the most famous or well-known brand. But for me, at least, they are amongst the favorites that I have had access to. And they have always been very specialized in a couple areas, probably most notably Manzhuan as well as Yiwu. And in particular, I really love their Manzhuan teas. Well, I love both, but I think they both stand out. And so 2004 to 2006, we can thank teas we like, the Jade Leaf, and Pedro, actually, for really helping to introduce these teas to the Western world. And, they become kind of a mainstay as the more premium boutiques exist. So these teas, the 2004 to 2006 series, probably the most covered of their teas. They are blends of different villages. So in this case, this Manzhuan tea is a blend of, I think, 3 or 4 different Manzhuan villages, supposedly all old tree material. And you can really tell that the material is high quality. Cheers. A little more of the greenness coming out now that we are steeping this out, but it's very brassy, a lot of fruity notes to this too, like dark fruit, which is very much up my alley. The pu'er taste in general, like if I were to describe the specific flavor notes for this tea, that's not what's necessarily going to elevate this tea to being a really high tier, like an S tier tea or whatever. It's the complexity of the aftertaste and how deep it feels. So for instance, like I can describe those notes, and you could have a really crappy tea with those same flavor notes, or you could have a really good tea, like in this case. So what sets that apart? Well, you feel the tea more in your throat. There's like a really rich throatiness that happens. It also coats the mouth, so pay attention to what's going on there. And for me, at least on this tea, you can feel the tea just go all the way into kind of your diaphragm, your body. And that's something that is uncommon. I think if you really, really hunt for even very basic factory tea and the body filling stuff, you can come up with something. You may be wrong, you may be right, but you can come up with some sort of feel like down to like a left shoulder tinkle. I don't know, but you can come up with some nonsense for sure. But for this tea, I have consistently kind of felt the depth and the deepness of the tea and the body filling as well. So it's not something that I take super lightly when it comes to describing in tea. And frankly, it's not necessarily something I need in most teas that I choose to drink. But I do think in appreciating this tea, it's something that's definitely there. The taste of it is not necessarily like, again, like a ton of different complex notes or whatnot, but it goes bigger and deeper than most all other Manzhuan teas you're going to run into, other than other really high quality ones. Yeah. Lots and lots of sweetness with this tea. Not necessarily in the initial taste. Again, this is pu'er, so that's why it's a little bit of a tricky tea to introduce other people to. But just the way that the taste evolves in your mouth in terms of aftertaste and whatnot. It's also very thick. This is not just like a subtle iwu that has no taste or whatnot. One thing that I do think has changed a bit with this tea, just as I've stored it longer, is some of those house perfumey notes have gone away, and you are left with kind of the base layer of tea, which is, in this case, very good. And so I think that's something that makes this tea stand out a bit amongst its peers, both from other boutiques as well as just more ordinary, tidy, plantation, factory type stuff. Yeah, so brewing this next one a little bit longer. I also, interesting to watch that old episode because it's where I previously lived, but I was using a Yixing as well as a Tetsubin, and so I've kind of, I guess, downgraded to a little bit more of a simple setup here with just a Gaiwan and a good old electric kettle. But what I do like about this setup is I can really modulate those brew times, and I think especially for the first couple steeps, it's nice to have some very quick flash steeps. So brewed stronger, there's a little more tartness that comes out. It's definitely a little thicker. I get more wood notes as well. But, yeah, you just feel the tea very deeply. These are powerhouse teas. These are very strong and very nice. Also teas that I wouldn't necessarily, like if you're trying to group this in a session, you might lose out on some of those notes and some of the more intricate things going on if you had this tea, like if you had 8 teas in the session and you had an 8th or something like that. So really trying to pick its spot, I think, is important to set the tea up to succeed. Love it. Good tea. Okay, so that concludes this episode. Let me know how you like this tea. Let me know your experiences. I think probably I would guess that the iwus are a little more beloved amongst people, the pu'er community. They're both absolutely worth trying out. And of course, it's nice to have variety. I wouldn't suggest just only buying Biyun Hao or anything. But for me, at least, these teas, the series of teas between 2004 and 2005 is just really, really high quality, kind of modern boutique productions. So thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you all next time. Cheers.